Hi, this is Anna. Welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm just picking up my son from soccer and I thought I've got 10 minutes hopefully. So let's see if we can get through a quick reading wrap up for July. So I'm in the car, but let's see how we go. So I was away for most of July. In fact, this goes back to June. I was away for almost all of July, but before I left, I had read Held by Anne Michaels and did not love it. This was interesting. The writing is stunning. She also does poetry. She's very highly regarded. I think one of her previous books was The Fugitive Pieces, and this is her latest novel. It starts in World War One, and it's a soldier dying on the battlefield and his thoughts, and then it goes through tracing his lineage. I think he has a child or he has a wife, and maybe it goes to her next, and it sort of traces through to these love stories and then their children and then the next generations. It goes all the way through to the present day. So it's told in vignettes and it's quite fragmented, and as would suit a poetic style, it's quite short sections, sparsely written, but I just didn't love it. And I think partly because each character you only spend a small amount of time with, so you don't get that satisfaction that you get from a whole novel where you follow a character through, and so you barely get to know them and then you're on to someone else, so you don't really, it feels a bit superficial. And also the love stories are very lovely and sentimental and romantic, but all very positive. There's no they didn't feel realistic to me, although they were beautifully written. And as I said, the writing really is economical and on point and very, very good. So at a writing level, I read the whole book through, even though I wasn't loving it, just because the writing was compelling, but it just didn't quite work for me. I could see some motifs flowing through, but apart from that, I couldn't see a narrative drive that kept us going, other than the fact that she wanted to explore these themes of grief and loss and memory. It has been longlisted for the Booker, so I'm interested to see what happens there and what people think of it. But we did it for the Adelaide Writers Week book club, and then I was away, so I missed hearing what the other members of the book club thought. But let me know if you've read that. That was Held by Anne Michaels. And then a real winner, which Annie recommended on the podcast, and I think we'll do a whole separate episode, was The Alternatives by Caoilinn Hughes. And this was one of Annie's best books of the year so far. And it's an Irish novel about four sisters. One of them, they lost their parents when they were young, and their eldest one has raised them. And then she, when she's an adult, leaves her family life and her own family and goes off grid, and the other three sisters have to decide what to do about this. For initially they just start looking for her, and she says, I don't want to be contacted, just let me be. But then they decide this isn't good enough, and they will have to go and find her and try to see what she's up to and bring her back. And it follows each of them in turn, and it's just wonderful. I'm really keen to speak with Annie about this in more detail, because I'm trying to work out why it's so good. The writing's really good. It's really well observed. The characters are so interesting and complex and flawed, and you want to spend time with them, and all different in their own, they all have their own completely different lives, and yet you get that sense of family between them, and it's just really, really compelling. So The Alternatives I highly recommend, by Caoilinn Hughes. And what else? I think I took this away with me because it's such a small book that fits into a handbag, but Elephants Can Remember by Agatha Christie. Look at that cover. That is really something. It's, as you can see, an old edition of this book by Agatha Christie. I had low expectations because on the All About Agatha podcast, which I highly recommend if you enjoy mystery novels and Agatha Christie in particular, they had not ranked this very highly out of all of her 66, I think it is, novels. And so I had low expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised because it's still Agatha Christie's beautiful, light, crisp writing, perhaps not as crisp as some of her other earlier novels, but you've still got Poirot, you've got Ariadne Oliver, the crime writer, and there are some wonderful scenes early on with Ariadne Oliver and her observations about author life. So I wonder how true that is of perhaps Agatha Christie herself, and it felt true anyway. It just was so satirical is not the word, but really wry observations. She's got such a great sense of humour, and the story itself is a bit dreamy and a bit vague, and I couldn't quite get a handle on it, and it didn't quite amount to as much as most of her earlier work does. And there's a lot of times where the characters repeat elephants can remember, and even the fact that Poirot says to Ariadne, you need to go and investigate, find the elephants and see what the elephants say, and that it really is, I think, overdone for my taste anyway. It that was off-putting, but it was all with a sense of fun. So I wouldn't say highly recommend it, but if you do enjoy an Agatha Christie, it's a fun, easy read as always. So that's that one. And then still on the classic crime, I really enjoyed this. This is The Franchise Affair by Josephine Tay. And it's the story, it's a slow burn, as in slow moving pace-wise or plot-wise, but really engaging, gently paced, with great characters, mystery set in an English village. And it's the main character is actually the lawyer, even though her Inspector Adam Grant is in this, or her detective. We follow the lawyer who gets dragged into this, even though he is not a criminal lawyer. He does much more sedate, country style legal affairs. But this woman rings him from a house, a very sort of almost like a haunted house vibe, where she lives with her mother, and says, we've been accused of kidnapping a teenage girl and trying to make her become a slave. And then she's just walked home and accused us of kidnapping her and hurting her. And this is all, then it becomes splashed in the papers, and it feels very modern, the way the tabloids get hold of these stories, and it's so one-sided. And he decides that he has to come to the defense of these two poor ladies, but there's this real intrigue as to whether they're telling the truth or not. And if they're not, what on earth happened to this girl and why did she disappear? And there's an interesting foreword by Tana French who says that this is really all about, it's a really interesting take on victimhood and who gets to be a victim, and how the media plays up the sort of innocent teenage girl as a victim. That the newspapers love that, and how there can always be another side of these stories. But really interesting, and I enjoyed that as a nice cozy holiday read. So that's The Franchise Affair, and she's just a great writer, Josephine Tay, so recommend that one. And the other one that I recently read was The Hollow by Agatha Christie. So that is a classic, and for a good reason. It's really strong, even not as a murder mystery, but just as a suspenseful novel. It's highly, I would recommend it. It's got complex characters. It's set around Poirot gets invited to a lunch at his neighbour's house in the country, and then someone's killed and falls into the swimming pool. So it's a very evocative scene. You can imagine this beautiful home and sparkling swimming pool, and then the blood dripping down, and so it's really well depicted. And he then goes on to solve the mystery, but it all depends on the psychology of these characters, and there's a love triangle, and it has all the elements. So really good Poirot novel, The Hollow, and you don't need me to tell you that, but I enjoyed that as well. So that's been my reading wrap up for July. Because I was away, it was not a reading holiday, I must say. It was very active, not much reading time, so I didn't get through that many books. I only took about 3 or 4 away with me, and I didn't even quite finish them. One, The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley, I DNF'd. I just wasn't getting on with it. I found the characters unlikable, and I donated it to the library at the place where we were staying. They had a beautiful library, and they had a book exchange shelf, so I thought they can have that because someone will love it, and that's the main thing. So anyway, I hope you've been well. Let me know what you've been reading, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.